in a way, we're having the American launch of Emma Jane Unworth's third novel. I hope I've got that right, Grown Ups. This is a book that has been in, the love for this book has spread all over Boswell, seeped into the cracks. Championed by Chris Lee, who is today's conversation partner. The book has gotten reviews, international raves, including from the Wall Street Journal. Anna Mundo called it essential reading for our dismal times. We are so honored to be joining up with Emma Jane Unsworth from somewhere in the UK, I think it's Wales, where it is British summertime. I think that's the time zone, I'm not sure. Anyway, and always wonderful when Chris does a conversation. So I'm gonna mute myself now because thank you so much for joining us.
Oh my goodness, thank you so much, Daniel. It's very kind. And Emma Jane Unsworth, welcome. I'm so excited to have you. Virtually here in the store, here in the break room. Grown Ups, this is one of my favorite books of the year. I'm convinced everyone else in the store to read it, and it's become several booksellers' favorite book of the year. So I wonder, for anyone who doesn't know the book, doesn't know anything about it, who just wandered in off the virtual street, I suppose, would you give us like an elevator pitch and maybe read a page or two to give us kind of the voice of the book?
Sure, with pleasure. Thank you so much, Daniel and Chris and everyone at Boswell Books for your tremendous support for this book, even before publication. Thank you. It's just, it's been wonderful to feel so welcomed, and thanks to everyone for joining as well. Hi. So I wrote this book because I wanted to, because I guess everything I write is semi-autobiographical in some way. And in terms of the emotional crux, I guess, of what's really getting at the central character. And so with this, it was about a woman in her mid-30s who kind of had her life sorted out in lots of ways. She owns her own home, she has a job she's worked very hard for and she likes, she has good friends, but still something has come in her mid-30s and blindsided her and completely screwed her life up. And that thing is her own biology. And that was drawn from my own worries and panics and concerns, and that what was so happening in my friends' lives. And so that was the kind of dilemma at the center. What if you've got everything sorted, but then this thing that you cannot control still comes and gets you? So that's where that side of it came from. And then I guess that played out on social media mostly, but just in the way that she started spinning out and messing everything up because of this great thing that had come in and just blindsided her. And it started ruining her friendships, her relationship, her social life, her work life. That to me seemed like it would play out best on social media and in a world, on the page. It felt like it would be most fun to do that, partly because it felt realistic for the character that she is and where she would go and where she'd get her kicks and her downers, but also because to me that excited me as a writer, because I thought I could be quite playful. I could have a lot of fun with that and do almost a digital comedy of manners, if you like, because I think there's so many potentials for screw ups online, and there's so much miscommunication, there's so many great pratfalls and so much great comedy in just sending the wrong text at the wrong time to the wrong person, or going down a wormhole on social media late at night. So that's where it all came. Those two things felt like they help bind the book together, I guess, both in terms of the heart of it and then in terms of the style of it and how it came out. So that was how it was born. So I will read a couple of very short sections for you, just to give you an idea of the tone, in case you haven't read it. Okay. They say screens at bedtime are bad for your brain, but the sensation of holding a phone is, I find, therapeutic. I find the shape of it reassuring, soothing. I press it to my chest like a Bible. Every few minutes I lift it up and look to see what has changed in the world. I feel the weight of my thumb. My heart pounds. My veins thrum. I am in every way alive and progressing. My brain is lit up like the earth from space at night. I have a couple more likes for the croissant. This is a social media post about a croissant, an Instagram post that she has agonized over ridiculously. I think it's reasonable to conclude now that it wasn't worth it. I squandered an entire morning on that. I can't keep building these cathedrals out of crumbs. I scroll. A friend of mine, a semi-famous scriptwriter, has posted a picture of herself in an elevator. She isn't smiling. She looks like she's in a perfume ad, like she's thinking, look at me, don't look at me. Who are you? I don't trust you. It's very effective and confusing. I comment, looking reflective. We're real life friends, but she doesn't follow me on here, which has always been a point of hurt. I know she seldom uses social media and has a strict sense of how she is seen. But why don't I fit in with how she's seen? Why am I not perfect follow material? Also, cuttingly, she follows some truly trashy vloggers, which is a real kick in the teeth. Now that I've posted the comment, I start to worry. It's like I forget this stage of the process, like I set myself up for it. She might not reply. She hasn't in the past. So why does that boil down to a failing on my part? I have to ask myself that because it does. I didn't used to have this innate distrust of myself. I feel like I've lost my pace. It's like everything has been speeding up and up and up, and I reached my own terminal velocity. I thought my 20s felt like rush hour, but no, my 20s were just pleasantly hectic. The 30s are the real rush hour. And I'll just read a little section from later in the book. Social caterpillar. I started going online drunk at night alone, setting up semi-knavish profiles on dating sites, stalking old spas. One time, in a stunningly productive vodka fug, I ordered 50 cardboard boxes to pack up my books. I skipped supper. I forgot the alarm code. Warning shots across my bow from the good ship self-sabotage. I sent away for a pack of those caterpillars that you incubate and watch grow into butterflies. I kept them patiently in a tank, in the corner of the dining room, watching them slow down and slowly form their chrysalises and hang like seed pods. They made it look so easy. When they hatched, the butterflies clung to the side of the tank, drying out. If you kept them too long in there, they died, but I released them too soon. Or maybe it was too late in the year. I found them dead and dangling from hedges and bushes. I came in carrying one once. Art was in the kitchen, that's her ex, holding a pack of 5 beer cans by the empty loop where the 6th had been. Where have you been? He said. Work. Then round at Kelly's. What's that? A butterfly. Looks dead. It is dead. He slept down in his studio. I slept in the bed, or rather I lay there staring at the ceiling, stalked by my own thoughts. He came in first thing. He hadn't slept either. His breath was beer. He said, are we breaking up? I nodded. He started to cry. I got up and went to the toilet. The smell in there. In the end, it was like cutting open a shark's stomach. Tin cans and toddlers' limbs everywhere we'd been. Sorry, that was a darker reading than I.
Oh, that's great. And let me say, I read it, I passed it on to a bunch of booksellers, and so I mined them for questions for this interview. So I think it's going to kind of be Boswell interviews, right? Because I've got questions from our booksellers, Parker and Maddie and Kira, who all love the book. We'll talk about it. But I think you touched on this a little bit, but maybe we can talk about it a little more, because the main character has so much going on. And I don't want to give too much away, but like her friendships, her love life, her family, her career, and even her own body, like everything is on the fritz for her. And I feel like there's enough in here for several books at once, or several different books. But so what was the moment, I want to know, what was the thing where you discovered like there's enough here for this book? There's enough to write this book. Was there a moment or?
Good question. Well, I think you're always, when you're in the stage of starting to write something, when you're between kind of clear projects, I suppose, because this book hadn't come to me, it wasn't something I've been trying to write for a while. It came quite quickly. I suppose what we were talking about before this chat was that quite often authors have a book that they've been trying to write for like 10 years, and I have one of those. So this wasn't it. That one's still not come out yet. But this one, but I think when you're in that kind of weird, nascent, cloudy place in between proper projects, proper forms, then you do, it all gets a bit jumbled up, and there is a process of working out like what actually fits here in this thing. And for me, because what I write is character-led rather than plot-driven, I just have to be guided by what I feel is right for that character's world and what feels right for their personality and their relationships. That's probably very much a genre-led thing. I think if I were to write thrillers, I'm sure it would be a very different process, and it would be much more about the maths of the structure of the plot and how that all pays off. But for me, I build the world always around a central character with a dilemma, an emotional dilemma, and then it's about, usually I start writing by imagining conversations between them and their friends or their close ones, and from that I build the world around. Even if that stuff doesn't make it into the final book, that just gives me such a good idea of who this person is and what they're really about. I was talking to a friend the other day about, she'd been writing a short story, and she's struggling a bit with it, and I said, well, a good tip that I use, a good sort of little device is sometimes I just try and write a conversation, or imagine them walking into somewhere, into a room that isn't necessarily part of the book, you know, or it doesn't have to be. It can just put them anywhere you want, dump them randomly somewhere, or say, right, they're going to the dentist, what are they going to do there? They're going on a date tomorrow, what are they going to do on that? And then that can just help you get a sense of the 3D of this person. So that's how that's how I do it. That's how I did it with this. And as for like that exact point in time, I think when I had probably about 15,000 words, but for me that usually feels like a good spot to think, okay, I've got like a good chunk of a good beginning now, because the books I write are quite short. They tend to be come out at about 75,000 words. So that's almost
That's
a quarter.
very exact.
Yeah, I know, it's so weird, but they come out like really like that. It's like, it's really freaky. But they generally do come out around the, like, yeah, the low 70s. Um, so, and I think that after around about the halfway point, around about 35,000, then I'm like, okay, it's downhill from now. So maybe it's like at a quarter of the way through that I start to think, right, there is enough here, and I'm going to see, you know, I can see the arc, and I can see this person's crisis, and how it's all going to be structured.
And you got into this a little with one of the sections you read, so I'm going to jump right into it. And this is kind of, I love so much of kind of the drunk phone usage, drunk interneting rather than drunk dialing throughout the book. And I think it's such a great way that you can kind of shortcut into the character, or that it seems like you used to shortcut into Ginny's life. And so this question actually comes from Parker. So I'll dive in with that. But Parker says, I found myself cringing so many times throughout the book because of the things Ginny was doing, but only because I could relate. Moments particularly stood out, include just about every time she decides to use her phone drunk. And there's the scene, and I remember the scene too, where Ginny, I think it even kind of starts a chapter where she's like, I would get drunk and go on the internet. And so I think writers and most people know that, you know, booze is drama fuel, right? But what in particular about the relationship between like alcohol and the internet were you trying to capture, particularly with Jenny? Because I think you got a lot in there.
I think the internet is like a stage, right? It's like a little stage, and it can feel really scary, or it can feel really safe, depending on who you're performing to, whether it's on a social media platform, or you know, and I think that alcohol, like in a lot of situations in life, just gives you a false sense of confidence, and you makes you get, you know, to get on that stage in a different way than you would sober. And then you have the horror and the record of that, you know, when you do sort of sober up and see or think about what you've done. So there's definitely comedy in that for me, but also absolute terror, because that is one of my greatest fears, and it's one of the things that I've put myself through the mill with the most in the past. I think regrettable sort of social media activity, or seeing other people do that, and just really just wanting to get over there, you know, and kind of just get them out of the way of what they're doing, because it's just like Twitter, for example, can be like the worst karaoke bar in the world, where and I, part of me wants to have no sense of shame about that, and just thinks, you know, well, whatever, just give people the benefit of the doubt, let them do whatever. But other times, I've not been able to be so kind to myself, and also I think This character is traumatized. She's not in a good place. She's not getting drunk and having fun. She's using it in a damaging way, and then she's not happy with herself afterwards. But she's in between that. It's not like she's just getting drunk on her own and feeling like she's messing up, which would be bad enough. But then she's had these kind of moments, these very lonely public moments, which I think that's the sort of the real poignancy of it for me, that she's felt like she was connecting, and she really wasn't. She was just isolating herself even more, and giving herself a whole load of worse feelings to grapple with the next day. And there's I get a really twisted satisfaction out of that as a writer, because I know that's just an awful place for a human being to be, but it's great drama. So just wanting to, you feel like a sadist, I think, when you're a writer, quite often, because you want to put your characters through these awful things, to give the book some dramatic power. But yeah, it's pretty mean.
Absolutely, yeah. No, it's great. Speaking of that too, her experience, her trauma, and everything she's going through. One thing that we all said, and I mean, I know you saw this because it was the splash book publisher used everywhere, but is that in my review, I said, this book's so good in their moments, it's so good, it's giving me panic attacks. And everyone who read the book here at the store, we were all, every time I would hand it to someone, they would come back to me and be like, oh my God, this is anxiety on paper, is what this book is. Like Maddie said, the anxiety is real in all caps. And Parker says, the antics make me laugh out loud and shudder in horror when I saw myself reflected in them. And I think what's really amazing is how closely you're able to pull the reader into these feelings of anxiety, the tension that she's feeling, and how relatable. So I just wanted to, how do you get such a visceral experience of anxiety on the page?
Probably because I'm quite an anxious person, and I draw a lot on that. And yeah, I'm just so interested in trying to get a brain on the page. That's what I was really trying to do with Jenny in this, to show her brain exploding on the page, and all of the horror of that. But then hopefully give her some light at the end of the tunnel as well, and not just leave her gasping. So yeah, anxiety is a big theme in my work in general, I think. And it's funny, really, because in one way, the books that I've written, you could see the characters as just being these sort of hard, kind of cold, badass with animals. They're just sort of quite wild women in some ways, to me, they always seem extremely anxious. They worry about everything. They turn everything over in their heads. They're really, to a fault, self-absorbed in that way quite often. And I like to point out the comedy in that, and the irony in how wrapped up in themselves they are. And they're not doing themselves any favors. They would do them good to open their eyes to the wider world for lots of reasons. But I suppose, yeah, I like neurotic comedy. I like that kind of comedy, and that attention to detail, and that over analysis of life, and that over analysis of communication. All of that I find excruciating and fun, and scary and real to me, because that's I suppose something that I know, if I'm not careful, if I don't check it and watch it, that's something that I'm really susceptible to.
I think another kind of expression of a lot of this in the book is how you play with the instances of obsession. And I think obsession is another big thing that's going on in this book. I think most clearly you'll see Jenny, the main character, is obsessed with Susie Bramble's online internet persona. Shall we say, gosh, an influencer. But also, and I want to talk about some of the other characters and these relationships, but also I think there's kind of an obsession on Ginny's mother's in the book, how she's obsessing over pushing Ginny to be something, be this, do this with your life, this is what you should be doing. And throughout the book too, there's all these opinions on another thing we should talk about, which is motherhood and parenting. But everyone's obsessed with telling each other how to be a parent, how to mother, how to do this. And I think, and this is me as an outsider to this world to some degree, obviously, but this obsession seems like a really natural reaction, almost an internalized behavior to the way kind of women are policed. behavior, interactions, everything, their bodies, the way women are policed. But so I want to know, is this kind of obsessive behavior something you see playing out in the women's relationships in the book, or in general, and how you're trying to bring that to the book, I guess?
Yeah, I think that the obsession around motherhood is definitely right. And for me, that was something that I wanted to explore because I was just so frustrated with the binary of either motherhood or non-motherhood. And women were too often defined by that choice, and that's simple, too simple split. That would those are your only options, and so I felt angry about that and cornered by that. And so that was one of the things that I really wanted to try and smash a bit in the book by showing different ways of being maternal, I suppose, and different ways of getting that fix and of showing that skill that wasn't anything to do um, with actually biologically physically having to do it, having to actually bear a child, because I think that the focus is too often on that, and that's what screwed Jenny up, and that's what I think traps a lot of women, psychologically and socially and economically and in every way. So definitely that the obsession not of the women, although we can be pushed into that through the panic, but the obsession of society, I think,
Right.
to push that choice onto women. What are you going to do? Are you going to do it? You're not going to do it. And just that was just driving me nuts in my 30s. And so that's why that's where a lot of the rage in the book, I think, comes from. I think there's a lot of rage in this book too. So yeah, for sure. And then with Susie Brambles, so she is the figure on Instagram that Jenny's obsessed with, and it's just that being obsessed with someone who you see as the flip side of you almost, or you don't see it, you think you know them, and you're obsessed with someone like a pop star or any figure of glamour or authority, and you can't see it's because it's what you're looking for in yourself that they represent, and that's actually, what you actually want is to be like that because you feel a lacking in yourself. There's a hole somewhere. So I wanted to show all of that, and I wanted it to be a woman because I guess I like to write intense relationships between women in my books. So that was why and I think that's kind of true for a lot of women. I know certainly for me, it's the women on there you want to notice you. So I wanted to put that in, for Jenny as well as a character. That felt like something quite interesting and real to explore.
Oh, that's really interesting. Yeah, I think there's that amazing moment kind of in the middle of the book of rage is a great word from it, where Ginny is drunk, she's on Twitter, and essentially says, just because you're a mother, that doesn't make you a good mother. And there's that kind of huge moment and exchange she has with this celebrity online who's posing with, refugee children and saying, as a mother, I feel terrible for these refugee children. And Ginny says, oh, so yes, as a non-mother, I only like it when refugee children starve. It's such a great angry moment, but it's really so stark and pushing that off. And this question comes from Maddie and plays right into that. But Maddie wants to know, there's so many different kinds of mothers, and you explore what it means to be maternal throughout the book. The microscope of social media adds a new level of expectations. So how do you think the, quote, age of social media has changed that idea of what motherhood is?
Good question. In some ways, I think it fits. It hasn't. In some ways, I think it hasn't changed it. It's because I think that what social media too often does is pressures you to define yourself as everything you will have ever been and will ever be in that moment, and that's all you can be, whether it's in a post or a picture or whatever. And I think you can't. On that basis, you can't be wrong. You can't have a chance to correct yourself. You get flamed. You get cancelled. You get all of that awful stuff which to me just seems so unprogressive and so stupid and so frightening, and so I think that's a big downside of social media. But I suppose in terms of support for whatever your choices are in life, and them feeling like real choices, I think that social media can often present a variety of people free to say what they want to say, and you can find your people perhaps and more easily than you could, especially right now, right? Especially this year. So I think it has the power to do a lot of good as well, but I think it also has the power to pin people down, and force them to define themselves as one thing or another thing, and that can just be, I don't think that's good for humans to have to do that, because I think we should be allowed to, well, we need to grow and change and move all the time to be alive, but also we should be allowed to contain conflicting ideologies, and that's certainly probably the only reason I write, is because I have this kind of constant argument and chaos inside of me, and that doesn't translate onto social media, and that's maybe why it's so terrifying.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, especially those conflicting ideas. Yeah, what a great way to put that. Let me roll off of that a little bit, because Parker wants to know that during the pandemic, and as you said, especially this year, the good and bad, of how we can connect. Parker's saying so many people have become more reliant on social media to feel connected to friends, family, work, whatever. And Parker noticed his own screen time skyrocketed in mid-March. Shocking, right? To the point that he even was like, I need a break, and walked away from it for a little while. So he wants to know, how do you think Jenny would react to the pandemic? How would she deal with the ups and downs of social media, especially in these times?
Yeah. I've been thinking about this. That's a good question, because I have actually been thinking how she would deal with that. Partly because I've been questioning my own sort of social media use, and get my screen reports like everybody else and see how my time's gone up. But also because I'm actually writing an extra chapter for the UK paperback edition, which hopefully will make it into the US edition, paperback edition too, about Jenny in lockdown. So it's going to be Jenny in lockdown as a kind of extra bonus for the paperback. So I've been thinking about this and thinking how would she deal with it? And I think definitely she would have to. It has to be the time when she gets a real wake-up call about the wider world, surely. Or maybe hilariously and tragically not. But I think that it would be great to do some stuff with her mum in LA, because Carmen would be in LA by that time. So it would be great to see how she's having such a better life than Jenny in many ways with her new lover, or not. And so yeah, I think that definitely there's more scope for Jenny and Carmen communicating via social media and via because that's they won't see each other in the flesh anymore. So yeah, but I think it could be time for Jenny to have a proper wake up call, and maybe. But then I never want to have like a Hallmark happy ending. I would never want to write a tale where the character kind of was completely healed and alleluia at the end of it. So I think there would have to be some kind of she'd have to screw it all up again at the end. There'd have to be something that happened, whether it's to do with Art and Susie, but there'd have to be something that turned it all around again at the end of that.
That's wonderful. I can't wait to read that chapter. In fact, I may just make someone send it to me early, because we've all been talking about that. We've all actually said we've all been kicking around a bunch of the characters, deciding who they'd be, what they've been doing during all of this. We actually, I think Parker decided that Carmen, Jenny's mother, would be an anti-masker here. She would definitely be, or sneaking out to the bar, and everyone would be enraged at her because she's joining the anti-mask protest or something. Oh man, yeah. So we all want you. We've all been saying
I love that you've been doing that. Thank you. I love it. It's nice to hear when the characters have lives like that go on.
Yeah. Oh, I love it. That's too in the book, and I don't think I'm giving the ending away to say this is one of those fantastic books where the character's going to continue to live with you for a while afterwards, and you're going to take her in all these different directions, and all of the characters. I love that so much. But speaking of Carmen, we haven't really talked too much about her, and she's an amazing character. Would you want to maybe just introduce her just a little bit, Jenny's mother, to everybody, and then where did she come from? That's what we all want to know. Was there an inspiration for Carmen, or is there a Carmen in your life?
No, I wish I knew a gin swigging tarot reader. That would make my life so much better. Carmen is my favorite character in the book. I mean, because Jenny is a nightmare in so many ways, and you wouldn't want to go. If I had to go for a drink with a character, it would be Carmen. And because I just think she'd be a laugh. And Jenny's just, yeah, this neurotic nightmare. So yeah, Carmen is my fave. And where did she come from? She came a little bit from Long Island Medium. I don't know if you know that show. So yeah,
Oh, yeah.
a little bit of
We
her.
hosted the Valid Medium at one.
So a little bit from her, and then just from my own interest in tarot and obsession with tarot, even though I don't really know that much about it. But I'm definitely, I used to have my cards read a lot when I was a teenager, and I've had them done sporadically over the years. But definitely, I'm just so interested in. To me, it's like therapy in a way. It's like a way of storyfying where you're at. And I know Carmen takes it further than that. In that, um, for Carmen, she actually thinks that she's communicating with spirits. But for me, that was important because that was a balance to Jenny's obsession with the internet, to set Carmen up as with all the voices that she hears. In a way, how is that different from the voices that Jenny is in contact with, and whose version of reality is more real? So that was just like a really interesting parallel to set up. And so I wanted to do that with Carmen too. And then I think I describe her in the book as a celebrity, like a glamorous celebrity sportswoman. And that's what I see. There's a woman who presents a show that we have in the UK called A Question of Sports, and she is an ex-sportswoman, and I can't remember her name. But I don't know if she's that well known in the States anyway. But she has like, she looks like glamorous, but she can tell she's been athletic, and and because I wanted Carmen to be like hard, she's northern, and I'm northern, and I wanted her to be like a woman that I could relate to from certain towns and cities up north. But then she's made money, she's done all right for herself. So she gets some manicures, and she's got good jewelry. And I'll tell you who else she's based on as well. There's a woman in a pub, my favourite pub in Soho in London. There's the landlady there. Oh my God, she's spectacular. So she's spectacular, and I just watch her whenever I go in there, and she's just got this like cropped platinum blonde hair, and she's about 60, and she's got all this amazing jewelry, and you would not mess with her, you wouldn't mess. But at the same time, she's brilliant, she's great, lovely, warm, charismatic, and I'm just like in awe. So Carmen's definitely a little bit drawn on her too.
Yeah, speaking of Soho, and you've got some great descriptions of that neighborhood and others in London in the book. I don't know, what's your favorite part of London that's in the book, I guess I should say?
Soho, 100% Soho, because it's got that theatrical edge to it still, I think, and it's just got a life to it, and it's where I've had all of my London late nights that have been the best and the most fun, and my favourite pubs are there, and yeah, I mean, I've not been for ages, obviously, with everything that's going on, but I do love Soho a lot, but at the same time, I resisted writing a London book because I'm like, no, I'm from Manchester. I'm not writing a London book. I don't want to do that. But it just came out. It was just where she had to be. That was where she'd moved to. She wasn't a character who's going to stay near her mother, but it was important that she was a northerner who had then moved south, because I think there's so many like little snippets of the book that actually were true. Like when she goes into the pub, I think she describes going into the pub and asking for nuts, and nobody can understand her, like nuts, and they're like, oh, nuts, and the pub's called the Dove, and nobody can direct her. That actually happened to my friend Nicola, and it's because they just couldn't understand her accent, which I just think is so brilliant. She had to like do an like, they're like, oh, the Dove, yeah, we know the Dove. So yeah, that just I just felt like and I was living in London by that point as well, very briefly, even though it rinsed me spiritually, financially, and emotionally. It was a great, it was a good year, big year, and I wanted to capture that feeling of being sort of like subsumed by this city, subsumed by the capital, and all the great stuff that did for me at that time where I was at, but also always feeling at odds with it. Even though it's people from all over the world live there. There's definitely something about being a northerner in London that is quite a unique experience, I think.
Oh, That's fantastic. Wow. I think we've got time. I'm going to ask a couple more questions before we throw to audience questions here. I've got one real writery question for you. So let's go for it. So much of the book you tell, and I love this, it's told through emails, unsent emails, and texts that are sent to other characters so they can proofread, not proofread, but, you know, social media proof, your texts and Twitter threads, Instagram comments. It's huge sections of this book. It's almost kind of an epistolary novel, and I really, really love that, especially the way you capture how much of writing and text is a part of people's everyday lives in a very casual way that perhaps it wasn't before. So, like, I think as a writer, what did that let you get on the page that maybe you couldn't otherwise?
It gave me momentum, I think, just because those small sections bounced off each other, and carried me through the writing of it in a lot of ways. Because actually, when I was writing this book, it was during a time when, because I wrote this book over the course of having a child myself, and the the fallout of that was having a big period of time where I couldn't write because I had postnatal depression. My brain felt like it was disintegrating. I was very sleep deprived, and so part of it, even though stylistically it works really well for her character, I wonder how much of that was actually necessary, though. You know, for me, that was like the only book that I could actually write, because my attention span and my writing periods of time was so short, and I just had to like kind of write in these short sections. So yeah, so I know that mentally that was what I could manage, as well as the fact that it works really well for that character whose brain is disintegrating, who's got this very frantic, frenetic energy as well, which I think is it feels like an exhausting book to read in lots of ways, I think, because it doesn't, in a way, it doesn't stop for breath, and she doesn't stop for breath, and that felt like important as well, because that's who she is and that's her character. So yeah, so those two reasons really, which are quite symbiotic. I think it's hard for me to disentangle them completely, and so yeah, does that answer your question?
I think so. Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And then let me ask my last question. I think it's a good last question here, and it wasn't originally that way, but we just didn't get to it. So perfect. Which is that the book is called Grown Ups. It's about, in a lot of ways, it's about growing up. It's about getting older, and it's about aging. And I think you explore that both from Jenny's 30s, her mother's later in life, and on light or not, like how difficult the disconnecting, reconnecting with other people is throughout the relationships and everything. And especially with kind of as the characters age, how they're considering like the necessity of their relationships. Were you thinking about that aging as you worked on the book?
Always. I think everyone's always thinking about it, right? Their own mortality, the big clock ticking in the corner. Yeah, I think that in a way I always write coming of age novels in some way or other. But I also think it's a myth that anyone ever comes of age, because I think it's like this idea that you'll stop. You'll reach a point where you'll like tick a load of boxes and be like, okay, this is who I am now, like forever. I think that's just a nonsense, and I think that you come of age over and over and over again. I think I've come of age probably about 5 times, and I hope I've got at least another 5 to go. So I think that yeah, it's a point in time when someone's just had a crisis, and then they're going to have an epiphany or 2 or 3, and then have a new way forward. And I also think I'm being a bit ironic in that she's in her mid-30s and she hasn't got her life sorted out, and I think that all the things, it's almost like we're getting later and later and later in the things that used to traditionally be markers of a successful life or a valuable life. So I think that that for me is just a little ironic poke at that too, in calling it adults, because she thinks that she hasn't got all those things, but those things are kind of not relevant anymore, if they ever were, like the house, the marriage, the kids, all those things that she feels she's lost because she doesn't have them. But actually, it's far more important for her to just have a sense of her own boundaries, and a way of preserving herself against being too fragile, too vulnerable, and worrying too much about what other people think of her all the time.
Yeah, wow. Um, And yeah, I really hope those things are, at 35, I'm hoping those things are becoming less relevant, trust me. So I think we'll throw it to questions now. And I like to do a speed round of questions while we wait for these questions to come in. So can we do that real quick?
Yeah.
Cool. So drafting, and I think I probably know the answer, but computer or longhand?
Computer.
When you're computer.
Yeah.
I have a bunch. What's your favorite app on your phone?
Do you know what, the weather just popped into my head there? How dull. But yeah, the weather. I check that obsessively all the time, everywhere. They're so British. Ugh. Sorry.
That's fine. No, mine has a cute little frog, so that my girlfriend's always like, "What's the frog doing?" Let's see. Oh, this is a good one. So yeah, you're from Manchester area, which I think everyone associates, of course, with music and everything. And speaking of my girlfriend, 24-hour Party People is like, that's a required monthly watch in my household, whether I want to or not. So who's Jenny's favorite band?
I think she'd like Prince.
Okay.
Do they have to be from Manchester? Am I being a terrible traitor there? Could I say, who's like, do you know what? There's a really brilliant guy from Manchester called John Cooper Clarke. I don't know if you've heard of him. He's more of a poet than a singer, but he's a singer. Honestly, he's amazing. And I think that he does just very quick fire, fast, hilarious songs that I love. So yeah.
I see a couple questions rolled in here, so let's go. From Jenny Colvin, can you talk about the name change for the book in the United States? Because in the UK, it's adults, and everywhere else it says adults, but here we get grown-ups.
I know. I'm so sorry about that. It's basically because they're... Okay, so the story is, the book was originally called Grown Ups when I wrote it, before it was published, and then we had to change it for the UK because there was another very lovely but much more famous than me author who had a book called Grown Ups coming out around about the same time. So we had to change it to adults, but actually that's true. You do have the true book. You have my no true title. And so we changed it, and actually I was like, okay, that's fine, because it works well with Animals, my previous book, Animals and Adults. It's fine, it's cool. But then when we came to publish it in the US, timing wise, there were a couple of other books with the word adults in the title, so they just thought it was too much of a clash to have that. So we changed it back to Grown Ups, just so that I think Emma Straub had a book out called All Adults Here. Is that right? And then also there's the Ferranti book with adults in the title. So it's interesting, isn't it? How writers are writing about similar things and using similar titles, and it's just, I like the way these waves come. I just always find quite nice. There's a kind of synchronicity, maybe in the consciousness there. That's nice. So that's why it's as boring as that, but it was very dramatic for me at the time because you get very attached to your title. And you end up writing the final edits, doing the final draft and doing the edits around that, obviously, in a lot of ways. So the title has been a bit of a roller coaster, but I've understood the decisions made at every step of the way, and they were the right ones. But it's nice to have Grown Ups on the cover there now. It's nice to see that, and the artwork is the same. So it's like a trick of the eye, almost, like it looks like the same book, and then you're like, oh no.
Yeah, well, I like to. You can say you're the one who got the title in the United States because here you're the more famous author, at least to us.
I don't know about that, but thank you.
Well, we do. Here's another good question from the chat. From Jennifer asks, as an author, has the pandemic influenced your writing process? Has it helped with more time or hurt? For example, depressing news cycle.
Oh my God, at first it was a nightmare because I have a 3-year-old, he was around all the time. So it's just impossible. But then everyone I spoke to, they were like, I bet you're getting loads done. I bet it's a dream situation for you, just stuck at home. And I was like, no. So yeah, we just had to find new ways of working. And then I don't have an office at home at the moment, which is another big problem I'm trying to sort out at the moment. Massive error. But it's just the way that things have worked out just with a living situation. But I'm going to sort that out. But that just meant I had nowhere to go that didn't feel like where I could just be completely a writer, and just like cut off from all of the usual roles and duties of home. And I think that's so important. Certainly for me, I find it very hard to shut stuff off. I can't even have music on when I'm writing. I need to be like in complete silence, and then it takes me like half an hour to just get in my zone. I know that sounds really wanky, but that is just what works, for me. I just had that little ritual, and that all went to pot. And then sort of as time went on, you adjust and you adapt, and I'm lucky. I know I'm lucky that I can do my work from home and I've not lost my job. So many of my friends have, and so many people have lost their work and lost their jobs, and so mine was just a case of adjusting and adapting, and now it's just weird writing scenes where characters are like having a coffee together and touching each other's arm, like when they get a joke, or hugging. You're kind of like, oh, what do we do about this? Kind of, should they be doing that? It kind of feels wrong. And so yeah, now it's just those little details that you've got to sort of think about. But yeah, overall, it was just those things. I mean, that's the sort of the technical and the small details of my life thing. Obviously, you've got this big backdrop of complete, shitstorm in the world right now, which is just it doesn't feel like a very nice world to be in right now in lots of ways. So I guess it made me think a lot about my own use of social media as well. I think, even more so. I just had to have a break from it completely, because everything suddenly felt very trivial, and everything suddenly felt very scary. Everything felt very trivial that I was putting out there, rather, but at the same time, everything in the world just felt huge, and horrific. So yeah, so all that going on as well. But yeah.
From Ralph says, do you get writer's remorse? Which I really like that phrase, Ralph. After publication for anything you might have done differently in the book.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. It's like shopping remorse, like retail remorse. So you can't take it back once you've written it. But I think I get, I think I get like I have self-loathing that I sort of have come to appreciate is just part of my process, because I interviewed this amazing sculptor years ago for an article that I was writing about her. She's called Claire Lamb, and she's an Australian sculptor. She's British, but she lives in Australia. And she was saying how she's accepted self-loathing as part of her artistic process. And I just love that. That was just like amazing. That was just like music to my ears, and so liberating, because I just thought, yeah, you get that regret, you get that remorse every time you put anything out into the world. You think, oh my God, what are they going to think? And I could have done that better. And you have all those agonies. But what if you just accepted that, and you just thought, right, I'm just going to dip my toe in that self-loathing every time. I know this is a circle that I'm going to go around on, and I'm going to dip my toe in the self-loathing, and then I'm going to rise again and make the next thing. So yeah, I've got better at not just trying to get rid of that stuff and but try and say, okay, this is okay, this is allowed and normal and just part of what I do. I think it probably keeps me on my toes in a good way as well. It means I never think, oh, that's a masterpiece, I can just relax now. But that's a good thing, because I think that complacency is death creatively. So I think it's probably good that I do go through that. But obviously you don't want to be paralyzed with fear and self-loathing. So it's just about managing it, saying, yeah, I'll just have a little dip in there, and then. But the best thing for me, the best antidote to anything like that, any kind of remorse about what I've made, is to make the next thing. Get my head into the next thing, which I'm usually doing anyway by the time something's come out, because it takes like a year for books to come out. So I'm usually right stuck in the next thing, and I think, well, this will be better. This is the perfect abstract that hasn't yet become an imperfect reality yet. So this is the thing I can focus on. So yeah, that's always the great cure for me. The next thing.
So what is the next thing? I mean, this seems like the time to ask, right?
It's perfect. I love the way I'm just leading into these questions.
You're very good at this.
I know. It's not a usual thing. So the next thing, I've written a memoir about postnatal depression, but it's not depressing, I hope. It's just entertaining and honest, because I couldn't find anything when I had it and didn't know what the hell was wrong with me for ages. So I've written that. That's coming out next May. And then I'm writing lots of TV. So I've adapted Grown Ups for TV. We've written the pilot of that. So hopefully I'll have more news on that soon. And then I'm writing a couple of other shows, a show for BBC Comedy that's about topless prize fighting working class women in the 18th century. There's a niche pitch for you. So yeah, there's this group of women who are these women existed and no one really knows much about them, but they were women who fought for cash in Georgian times. When we hear about Georgian times, we always hear about pastel-clad Jane Austen style characters, very posh people, or it's all about the brothels, whereas this is like about these women who made a load of money fighting and did very well. Some of them bought their own houses, which was like unheard of in those times for women, but they did. And so yes, it's a comedy. It's BBC Comedy that I'm working on that for. So it's all played for laughs, but hopefully has some good political grit to it as well, but all in a fun way. So writing lots of TV, and then I'm going to write another novel next year. I think so. I'm going to try and do the one that's been taking me 10 years to write. That's like we were talking about before. So I have this goddamn book that I've been trying to write for like 10 years. So let's see if next year is the year that I can finally do it. There's always something that doesn't work out in it, and then I divert to another project. But let's see. Maybe next year will be the year, and I finally shake that monkey off my back. We'll see.
Our fingers are crossed for you. And that television show, that sounds like the most perfect American television pitch I've heard in years. So I think you're fine. Niche new. Well, I don't see any more questions unless Daniel has a hand raised. I'm going to wrap it with my favorite question to ask, which is, what is the one question that absolutely no one has asked you that you're like, why is no one getting this? Why is no one asking me this about this book?
I don't know. God, I don't know if I have one of those for this book. I feel like, yeah, there's not a question that I'm scared of. I guess other than my mother reading it and saying, "Is this me?" which she didn't, so that was a relief. So yeah, so that's
it's a poor mum, right?
I dedicated it to her, so it's fine. But I suppose you always worry a little bit if you write something. But my mum was not a tarot reader, and in no way is that character based on her. But yeah, you always worry a little bit that people from your life are going to recognise little tidbits and think that maybe there's more to it than there is. But no, she didn't. She just enjoyed it.
Oh, good. It is Grown Ups. It's one of my favorite books of the year. This has been absolutely fantastic. Emma Jane Unsworth, thank you so much for taking the hour to sit down with us.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And thanks everyone for listening. Thank you. Thanks so much. It's been a real pleasure.
It's all here on this side of the pond. Thank you. Thank you everyone for watching as well, because as we say, we would not have a bookstore, virtual or otherwise, without you. Daniel, unless you've got anything, I'm going to sign off. All right. Thank you again.
Thank you. All the best, everyone. Thanks so much. Bye-bye.